Hi, welcome back to Bexhill West. Well, today's episode is all about the station canopies. But while showing you that, I'd like to have a little discussion about how often perfection is the enemy of good enough. Now, one of the real challenges of recreating any structure that exists in the real world, particularly one that is still present and hasn't been demolished, is that there's this ever-present challenge of deciding to what level of accuracy one wants to work. Somebody suggested a couple of weeks ago in the comments that maybe I was taking perfectionism a little bit too far. Well, I'm definitely not perfect. My model isn't perfect, and if we have a look at this canopy frame I'm making here, I'm sort of looking at it. It looks quite crude, really, given that it's been laser cut from material that's far too thick. Now, I deliberated with whether or not this ought to be etched brass. In fact, I got as far as producing a set of drawings, all the artwork required to get this thing etched, and then just decided that, do you know what, it's just going to be too expensive and take too long. So I made a compromise. And I'm happy with the compromise. This is all about compromise. But it's a real challenge trying to recreate something which exists in the real world. Now, I've been very fortunate with this structure in particular, and there's a wonderful set of photographs available online which show it in great detail. And so it's been a relatively simple job to recreate this structure on the computer. But always that challenge of to what level of perfection do you sort of strive for? Now, most of what I'm doing here is sort of completely new to me. I'm used to working sort of full size, and I'm not a model making expert. So everything you see me doing here is me kind of trial and error, finding my way and working things out as I go. I'm definitely not an expert in anything that I do, and my work is definitely not perfect. But I try to achieve perfection. I think the struggle to achieve perfection pushes us all on to do our very best work. And you know what, I'd rather at the end of the day be dissatisfied by not achieving a perfect outcome than sort of suffer the frustration of just having taken it easy and produced something that was, comfortably within my ability. Anyway, there we go. There's the station canopy. Now, I decided to subtitle this video The Pursuit of Perfection, not because I think that I've got any pretense to perfection, but really just to highlight through this video some of the challenges of trying to work towards recreating a prototype as accurately as possible. Now, I'm going to put on screen some pictures. Now, these images came from a website which is curated by Mike Pannell, and Mike has very kindly allowed me to use images from his website to illustrate these videos. Now, the component you can see here is a short canopy which leads to the main station concourse and sits between the station building and the refreshment room. Now, I've enjoyed making this piece, and you can see from Mike's photos that all the detail there to recreate it accurately is there, so it's been quite a fun thing to make. Now, I said that with recreating a sort of an existing prototype, we'd lead to challenges, and I'm going to show you as I put all of this together just what one of those are and just how very, very frustrating it can be, and why really the art of compromise is perhaps more tricky than the pursuit of perfection. So let me reassemble all of this and I'll show you what I mean. I hope you enjoyed that transition shot. Certainly I was delighted when I saw it all come together and the old photo fade away to my model and see that on the face of it there's been a reasonable level of accuracy achieved, certainly in a model of this scale. However, I'm aware that when watching it back in this way, it looks as though the whole process is quite straightforward and it's all gone perfectly first time. That's definitely not been the case. In fact, I've had a great deal of frustration with this particular element of the build, and sadly it's led to a compromise and a little bit of extra work. So what I'm going to do is show you down from on top and see if I can discuss and communicate what's gone wrong. I don't actually know myself, but I'll show you and we'll see what you think. When this project started, I had no drawings to work from, so I was using maps and photographs and the occasional diagram that I could find online. But one of the measurements that I knew was the width of the station platforms, and so from that I was able to kind of figure out the width of these glazed canopy frames. And I realised that there was a relationship. They were sort of half as wide as they are long, and that if I looked at old photographs and I measured them, I could see that the width of the frames here matched those here. And so from that I was able to calculate some basic geometry. And in fact, the very first drawing I did for this whole model was simply a set of dashed lines which represented the frames of the concourse canopy and the canopy that extended down the platform. And everything else was tied in around that, because I knew that this refreshment room would sort of butt up to the end of this here. I knew that the station building itself would sit here, and those seemed like good reference points. Now I knew that there were 3 columns across this sort of lattice beam that runs down the length of the concourse here, and I knew that when this intersected with the beams that run back to the station building itself, that there was a column just here, one here and one here. And in fact I can remember one of the very first things I'd done once I got the basic frames marked out was started drawing out the station concourse itself, and I marked 3mm diameter holes where those canopy columns would go. And that's been a datum around which everything else has been constructed around. And so this is the problem I've discovered as I put this all together. Now if you look carefully, you should hopefully be able to see just here is one of the columns for this canopy. Now it's just a barbecue skewer at the moment, but don't worry about that. That's where it is. It's difficult to see where it sort of locates on this frame, so I've got another stick here which I'll sort of put on top of it. So that is the position of that column, which hopefully you could see is probably about ½ an inch away from where it should be. So in my design, this was here. Now that's not a problem because none of this is glued down yet, so what I simply did was shift the whole station across so the column's in the right place. This was a problem when I attached this canopy structure here, in that this front facade of this over this gable ran in front of one of the windows. So clearly that wasn't right. So in order to make this work, I've actually had to shift the whole station building ½ an inch that way, and so these columns are now in the wrong place, and I don't have a solution for it. Now it doesn't really matter because I can fill the holes where they go and just re-drill them and nobody will ever know. That's going to look perfect, except it creates another problem. When this was modelled on the computer, I modelled the concourse area and the footprint of the station building, and that was all engraved into a piece of MDF which I've used to form this pavement. Now if I zoom in, you should be able to see a line here which represents the engraving where the end of the station should be, and you can see how I've had to move the station along. Now that's not a problem. This pavement hasn't had its final texture on, so that can be filled and I can make that look good, so that isn't a concern. What is a concern is that the end of this canopy now projects further than it really ought to. And I could cut it down shorter, that is an option, and I may well do that. But really the biggest problem is a little bit ironic given my last video, but anyway I'll show you the next problem that this has caused. So the real problem should now be painfully obvious. In shifting the building along, it now no longer fits where it should do, and it oversails the pavement and the cobbles that I put in last week, which is so very, very frustrating. Now there is a potential get out of jail card here, in as much as when this pavement base was originally laser cut, it was too big to fit the bed of the machine that I was using, so I had to do it in two pieces, and you can see the join here where this main piece has been extended. So it shouldn't be too big a job just to dig all of this up, dig up all of these sets that I've put in, cut a new pavement piece that is slightly longer, which will run around and give me the correct margin between the end of the building and the curbstones. So that's fine, that's the bodge, and I'm confident that when it's done it won't even show that I've made an error. But it does mean that this building is now not where it needs to be, or my sort of quest to have things perfect is now compromised. So there you have it, a whole load of messing around, and I've still not got a perfect result. And really that's the essence of this whole thing. If you try and chase perfection, you never achieve it, and it just becomes a source of frustration. Now I did my best to chase it down, in as much as I made 4 separate versions of this. This is one of them, and you can see even this has had a modification to it. And I had this idea, and it was crazy really when I think back on it, that I would kind of cut the corner off. I even made a modified glazed frame that would kind of oversail the side of the refreshment room a bit and buy myself back that little bit of extra space, but that in itself looked wrong. So there you go, we chase perfection, and it's never achievable, and this is why perfection is the enemy of good enough. So here on in I'm going to do my best just to accept good enough. And so there you have it, that's all for this week. Now the truth be told, my week has been much busier. I've been working on a project for one of the viewers, and I've also been working on something rather special which I hope will come up in the next couple of weeks, where I talk about that Rother Valley rail tour that ran to Bexhill West in 1958. I've been doing loads of research about that, and which has led to another kind of sub-project which we'll get onto. I was going to mention it today, but I think we'll save that for a future episode. Now last week somebody commented on the lovely painted figures that I've been using to sort of illustrate the model. And I said in the comments that I would include some details of where they came from in this video. Well, as it happens, I've got some more now, and I've got quite a collection, and I'm about to start painting them. So what I'll do, probably next week's video, will be just about the little miniature figures, where they came from, and I'll show you what I intend to do with them. Now on the subject of videos, I've been so busy with work since Christmas that it's actually a struggle making a video each week, but I like to, because it's sort of a bit of discipline for me. So I don't know how long I'm going to keep that up for, so next week's video will be a much shorter one, and hopefully making that I can kind of buy myself a little bit of time to put some slightly longer and better quality ones together. Anyway, till next week, I thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you soon. Cheerio.